Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this Brickworld special presentation. I, of course, am one of your hosts, Mark Larson, Chief Brick Officer of Brickworld. And if you joined us before, you know that this guy, the guy on my left, is everybody's favorite host, Mr. Ben Hauger, Z-Servers. How you doing today, sir?
I'm ready to go. This is the most exciting thing at Brickworld for Chicago for many people, and we're going to talk about it today. The Great Ball Contraption.
That's right. So here we are, our first Brickworld virtual presentation. And as Ben just said, we're going to be talking about the Great Ball Contraption today. And we have a number of special guests joining us to demonstrate their modules and also talk about how to get started on your own module if you're so compelled to do so. So let's start with Brickworld's GBC coordinator, Mr. Jeremy Moody. How are you doing today, sir?
Good. Good to be here.
Yeah. Appreciate you joining us. Excited to go?
Oh, yeah.
How's everything looking for Brickworld Chicago this year?
It's always going to be a big show. When we get there at GBC, we never know exactly what's going to be there until everything's set up, but we know it's going to be good.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us today. We also have the original Chief Brick Officer of Brickworld and his buddy Rafe. We've got Brian and Rafe here today. How you guys doing? You guys definitely ready to go. I can't hear you, unfortunately. I'll have to add this to the stage at the same time. Now try again. Sorry about that.
All right, let's try that. Now, can you hear us?
Yeah, I didn't have your phone in the stage because it takes up room and only gives your audio. So I guess we have to have that up every time you're talking.
Oh, you can see us dancing. We're doing great. We're ready to roll on this thing and have some fun.
It was worth it. It was good TV either way. So
live TV is always a thrill.
Thanks for joining us today, guys. Appreciate that a lot. And also, last but not least, we've got Paul. Paul, how you doing today, sir?
Hey, hello. Doing good today.
Good. Glad to hear it. Well, we've got a runner show today that is usually we give an itinerary to the show, how it's going to go. And we've just gotten through our welcome portion. And talk to me a little bit about the 20 years of GBC, you guys. Happy 20th anniversary, by the way.
Yay. And there's much rejoicing.
Yeah, it's fun.
So we started the first public GBC display was in Lafayette, Indiana in 2005 in April. And the first real big one was at Brickfest 2005 at George Mason University in Washington, D.C. in August. And Rafe was a part of that?
I was part of it.
Yeah. Jeremy, were you part of that?
No. I first saw GBC at the first Brickworld 2007, and then I joined in the next year.
All right. Yeah. So Rafe and I were both there, and it was quite the undertaking that year because only about 2/3 of the modules really kind of worked because it was all brand new to us and we hadn't figured out how to make everything reliable and not drop balls. And so it got very exciting. But that first loop, Tom Atkinson was there, Steve Hassenplug, Brian Davis. We had about 46 modules in the loop. That is now, almost 1/10 of what we have in Chicago every year.
And the room was the size of a small walk-in closet.
It was a double classroom.
Yeah, but it was packed and it was very tight. And we ran GBCs about half hour every hour, and it was 900 degrees in the room.
Yeah, we were overwhelming the AC, so we had to shut it off to clear the room. Otherwise, we would have died.
Nice.
But, it was fun. It happened to be that year that Kjeld Kirk Christensen and Jørgen V. Nudstrup were both there from Lego. So we had the CEO and the owner of Lego show up at the show, and they were very excited about it. And even though they've never launched a GBC set, they embraced us and gave us a whole bunch of stuff to make more GBC stuff.
Nice. That's fantastic. All right. Well, anything planned this year for the 20th anniversary? Is there something special happening at Brickworld or anything happening around the world for 20 years?
We've got a special brick for the people who come and build a module, but otherwise, it's going to be another good GBC, and I hope that we see a bunch of brand new things that we've never seen before.
Great. Yeah, we always do see brand new things that we've never seen before when it comes to GBC. Well, great. Thanks for being here today, guys. Let's get started. I believe we're going to be looking at Jeremy's modules first. So after our GBC walk-up song, we will take a look at what Jeremy has to show us today. And thank you to VMAC Attack for composing this walk-up song for GBC.
Sound of mechanical marvel all around. Archimedes grooves and samples galore. Sometimes it's a train that's never born. Contraptions, nothing more than beautiful distractions. Contraptions, I know that it's true, yes, we both belong to you, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Contraptions. Some say but that's alright. My grateful contraption brings me delight. The harder it gets, the more it throws fits. That's why we got tweezers in the back. Contraptions, nothing more than beautiful distractions. Contraptions, I know that it's true, yes, we both belong to you, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Contraptions.
All right, thank you again to VMAC Attack for bringing us that great little ditty about Great Ball Contraption. And now we're looking at Jeremy's modules. Jeremy, what you showing us today?
Yeah, so we mentioned Tom Atkinson in the intro as being part of the very first GBC. He wasn't able to join us for this, but he very kindly loaned me some of his modules. And first one we're looking at here, this is one of his, and it's one of my favorites. So this is a pneumatic powered module. So I can slow it down here. And what we have right here is a pneumatic pump. So there's a Lego motor back there, and that is just driving that pump as fast as it possibly can. And all the other motion that you see in this is happening because of that pneumatic. So that air pressure, if you follow this hose back, it comes, going to try and get in here close. It comes into this little switch right there. And that switch is directing the air between these pistons. And every time a piston moves, the later part of that motion is going to switch that pneumatic switch, and that directs the air to a different piston. And all that turns into this elaborate motion. One of the specs of the GBC is 1 ball per second, and this module can't quite keep up with that 1 ball per second, but I still love it because it's just so awesome, and there's almost nothing else out there like it.
That's very cool.
So the next one is this wave, and this is just another interesting method of moving the balls along. Again, it's just a single motor that is creating this complex motion, and we have these series of lift arm linkages that bring the balls along. The balls then go into the black hole, and this uses the conveyor belt, but the conveyor belt is actually bent backwards.
Nice.
And you can bend the conveyor belt backwards a little bit, and if you have enough of it, you can make a full circle, and that's what that does. So it lifts up the balls, and then when they get to the top, they drop through that hole in the back.
Cool.
Yeah, very nice. I think that track piece, when you do it backwards, it makes a really stiff circle when it's all in there. But it's kind of got to be a certain shape, and it looks like how's it being rolled on the backside there, Jeremy?
Oh yeah, so it uses those gears, the cogs, just like a conveyor belt you would normally put in the other way, but it's resting on a couple of them. So there's one on that side, and there's another one on that side. Sorry about the shaky camera.
It's all
Yeah.
good. You're doing actually really well with it. I have a question about those treads. I know you guys have to replace the gears quite a bit. Do those treads wear down as well?
So in this particular one, it's not really an issue, but it is a problem when you're going around a normal conveyor loop, because every time it bends, it makes that turn to go around a corner, and then it has to straighten out again. You're just wearing off a little bit of that hinge, and they last a good long time, but they eventually do start to get sticky.
Good to know. I would say, from what I know at Tom, these modules are probably about 20 years old.
Yeah, most of these are pretty. I don't know exactly when he made all of these, but these are some of the oldest ones.
but we do know Tom hasn't made any new modules in quite a while.
Yeah.
So
miss having Tom at shows for sure.
Well, he's still at the Brickworld show. So,
yeah,
and he plans to be there this year too. So
awesome.
So we have the white lifter module here, and that again, it's these little cog pieces that just cause this regular circular motion of this block, and then there are cheese slopes inside that catch the ball with every step to keep it from rolling back down. This module also has a function to recirculate by flipping this switch here. You can make the balls roll back in the other direction. And that's a really helpful feature with modules, because if we have something break and we want to have things continue to run in the loop while that broken one is being worked on by the person who built it, we still get some cool stuff going on.
Nice.
Yeah, and I know that's not an uncommon occurrence, is to have a little error. These still have tolerances of the Lego variety, so these machines don't always work perfectly. Tell me about the fear that rises in your eyes every time you see someone reach in to try to grab a ball and move it out of the great ball contraption. Who's just a spectator of the show.
Well, we don't want members of the public reaching in and grabbing things.
Yeah.
And that does happen occasionally, and we worry about it, and sometimes that makes something break, and but it's Lego, so we can fix it.
You see that ball? You see the ball in the corner, the yellow module, Ben?
Yeah.
It's just below. Right. That's the kind of thing people have. Some people have to stick their hands in to fix that. They can't have a ball stopped somewhere.
Yeah.
And so we try not to have that happen, but it's going to happen inside these modules. There's going to be a dead spot. As long as the ball's out of the way, we just leave it there, because if we move it, there's just going to be another ball show up there.
Yeah. Lego train track doesn't stop people's hands, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I know as part of this, that means you almost always have to have someone on call to fix mechanical issues, spot them. If as you mentioned, it sounds like the goal is to move a certain number of balls per minute. If the module isn't keeping up, you have to refill it at a certain point. So do you guys have shifts of people assigned to pay attention to the great ball contraption, or how do you work that while it's running?
So we don't have regular shifts. We're just all sort of working, and we take breaks as needed. But usually at these big shows, we have plenty of people to watch everything. For the most part, people watch their own things, and then they need to step away for a bit, and someone else can watch them.
It's at the smaller shows like the Brickworld Indianapolis, Brickworld Fort Wayne, where we only have 3 or 4 people with 25 feet of modules each, that you got to live with your head on a swivel to keep an eye on everything. You don't get a lot of breaks, and we try to bring in some other people that are GBC familiars to help. That way we can keep an eye on things without losing our minds.
Yeah.
So just gonna continue talking about these modules. So the red one here is called the sweeper.
Nice.
And as you can see, it sweeps the balls along, and it's again sort of a stair-stepping approach.
Yeah.
And the balls get stopped at every one of these arch pieces. So those are just the arch pieces turned upside down.
I say most sweepers I see don't elevate as well. Like a lot of them are just like they fall into the pit, the arm sweeps them out, and then they go back out at about the same level they went in. So it's nice to see this kind of stair-stepped sweeper. Is this typical for where the is this the standard for where the ball is supposed to enter and the ball is supposed to leave?
That's a good question.
Thank you.
So one of the parts of the GBC standard is we have a 10 by 10 by 10 bucket like this here, and that represents the input. So your module is not allowed to have an input bin that is taller than 10 bricks high or narrower than 10 bricks wide or 10 bricks deep. And it needs to be able to pass into a bin this size of the next module. So in theory, if everyone follows the rules there, we can line the modules up in any order.
Nice.
And your inbox has to also be able to handle a 30 ball dump
Yes.
At any one time.
at any one time.
Okay. And in practice, how often is it that you can actually line up each module like that, or do you have to do a little bit of moving around to make sure that the modules work well together?
There's always a little finagling because some modules we see that they made their input bin a little too tall, so we need to find a module that's able to drop them higher up to go right before that one.
And some modules don't like the 30 ball dumps. They may work, but they aren't as reliable with those dumps. So you try to put a module that you know can handle the 30 ball dump there past the dumping module.
So what we're seeing here is the Archimedes screw. So Archimedes,
I love this model. Yes.
The famous Greek mathematician inventor came up with this idea for pumping water. And same idea works with these Lego soccer balls. And it's just a bunch of these very thin lift arms, and then that Technic half pin to hold them into that spiral shape. So the lift arm at the very bottom and the lift arm at the very top are locked to this long Technic axle, and all the rest are just squeezed in there by that Technic pin. This is another one that has this module has that recirculation function where I can flip that switch and then all of the balls just return back instead of going on to the next one.
It's a great way to test it before you bring it to a show.
Yes. And that's another excellent point, Mark, that if you're thinking about joining a GBC loop, one of the most important things is to do a ton of testing at home.
You guys recommend what, like 8 hours?
Oh, at least.
Okay.
And yeah, you can make something and it will run just fine for an hour, but then when you bring it to the show and it has to run for 8 hours straight, anything that can go wrong will go wrong.
Right. Brian has a great story about that from Grand Rapids, which ended up being a positive experience, but it was quite a marathon to get there by the end of the weekend. Modules just kept dumping out and out and out of the footage of that GBC loop this year. That was fun times for Brian.
Yeah, that's what it was. Now, Rafe literally did a reliability analysis years ago.
Yeah, I ran a number of, I did some general reliability stuff. If you want to have 40 modules in sequence and not have a breakdown over a 30-minute period or something like that, the probabilities get in your way unless you are really, really, really reliable. And I recommend 40,000 balls without an error before you consider it good. Of course, nothing does that because 40,000 balls is a long time. At 60 balls a second or 60 balls a minute, that's a lot of minutes to get to 40,000. So the general point is you can't overtest. You can't overtest. And then the other thing is engineering each module so that it will work in a place where the tables aren't level or it's very humid.
Yes.
Or things get bumped by little kids. Any of those things are things that can get in the way. And those are near and dear to my heart, basically, because I failed to follow those rules. But that's those are things that are important. If you're relying on a little one or two plate slope over the course of 16 studs, you should rethink what you're doing, because you're going to get a problem. You're going to get a problem. So.
Now, Brian's done some cool stuff. I haven't seen anybody really repeat it, where he's built like kind of a leveling base that not only catches balls, but kind of it's kind of like the anti-convention center table base to kind of like keep things level. You can line a bunch of modules up on it, and it catches anything that spills out. Instead of it falling on the floor, it returns to the side of the base. Now, is that something other people have picked up on, Bonahum, or is that just something that you've done?
That's pretty parts intensive. I only have enough of that to do 8 feet, and so it takes up an entire Lego K8 box.
Yeah.
So you can imagine, if you wanted to do. If you're trying to get to a show, obviously modules come first. So most people don't have room for another K8 or 2 K8 boxes to set under their stuff.
Hey, Jeremy, this ball pump. Go ahead.
But the other thing about failing, there's multiple different ways a GBC module can cause problems. One is ball leakage. If it's dropping a lot of balls, that's bad, because if you have 60 modules in a loop and each dropping 1 ball a minute, you're going to, in 6 minutes, you're going to drop, or in 5 minutes, you're going to drop what? Each ball's dropping 1 a minute, and 60 in the loop, you're going to drop 300 balls.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you typically have 300 balls in the entire loop. So you're spending your whole day running around putting balls back in. So ball dropping is a lot worse thing than you might think. Then there's ball jams, and ball jams can happen in the inbox, or they can happen in your output. And so ball jams obviously cause the balls to stop flowing, and you're running around trying to find where that is. And then there's absolute breakage of the module, where the module explodes or just stops working for whatever reason. So there's multiple ways these things can fail, but only one way they can work.
Yeah, and we don't want balls on the floor either for the public who might be walking by, slipping on those things. One thing to step on a Lego piece is another to step on a ball when you don't expect it underneath your foot. So, Jeremy, this ball pump we're looking at here, the blue and yellow model, is that the spinning axle in the center? Is that an example of an agitator, or is that part of?
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so that spinning bit there is just to agitate the balls, so that if you don't get one like just caught right here in the corner, it'll get swept along and into the ball pump. So
nice.
A ball pump, we haven't explained what a ball pump is, but basically there is a column of balls in this machine, and when a ball comes along, it gets pushed into the bottom of that column, and then the ball at the top gets pushed out. This was a workshop module that we did at Brickworld Chicago, designed by Brian Alano. And so if you were at Brickworld that year, you might have had a chance to build one of these.
It's hard to see what the piece is, but Jeremy, zoom in on the flag a little bit there. There's a Lego flag on either side of the pump that's going up and down, and that's actually acting as a ratchet. So when a ball gets pushed up past that, the weight of the ball stack now sits on those 2 flags instead of sitting down on the pump mechanism. So the pump mechanism pushes the ball up through, it ratchets in place, and then the pump mechanism goes back down empty to get the next ball. Otherwise, your whole stack could just sit there and move up and down.
And a 2x2 flag, it looks like, on either side of that push. Acting as the stop on that. And then I see this, this next part's very colorful.
And I'm sorry, Ben, the instructions for that module are available at greatballcontraption.com.
Ooh. Yeah.
For free.
If you want to drop that link in the chat, in the private chat, I'll put it up on the description. Or you can drop it in the chat for this video.
So
we can do that later. Don't worry about it.
This next module here, this is the first one that I worked on. This was actually a collaborative model with my brother. So this was at Brickworld 2008. That was its first show, and it's been back to several Brickworld since. And we've got the old style conveyor chain there. That it's. One of the issues with this is that chain is quite weak, and it is pretty easy if you got just a little bit of a jam for that chain to pop. And I don't know, when I was maybe shaking the camera around over here, I was trying to repair this module. In the meantime, doing that one-handed, not the easiest thing, but here it is.
So talk about the reliability of those chains, Jeremy.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. They pop, and then it can be a huge pain in the neck to get them back together because it's under tension. And
So while a lot of us used those chains early on in GBC, we learned that the reliability was low enough that we didn't want those in our modules because it just causes breakage, and we want the reliability up.
Yep.
Yeah, Jeremy, I'm noticing this particular one. You were saying this was sort of your early Great Ball Contraption introduction here. Very colorful, and I've noticed that with a number of Great Ball Contraption modules. A lot of times they seem like they're designed more for form, for function over form. Is that always the case, or do you notice people who try to do a little bit of both?
Oh, there are definitely people who build some beautiful things. In the case of this one, yeah, it's form and function over appearance. And this was, I was still a teenager when I built this one. Well, I guess I was 18. And my Lego collection was nowhere near as large as it is now. So we just built with the parts we had on hand.
Yeah. And I suppose that adds a certain element of nostalgia.
Yeah.
All right, we got Bethany right in the house. She says it's good to know about those chains. A good tip there.
Well, let me mention another thing about those chains and any of the things that are being built here is that if you're relying on I guess lots of force or these are Lego pieces, and anything you can do to minimize how much stress they are under is a really good thing. So if anything is wearing more than it should, if anything is tight, if something isn't spinning freely, then that's a bad design. Yeah. And anything you can do to soften that for these, this is a pretty simple thing. The ball weighs about 1 gram and you're lifting it not very far. If you're burning out motors in an afternoon, then you're doing something wrong. So an example of that is those chains. If you can use those chains, but they have to be, the load on them has to be very small.
All right, look who else is in the house. It's channel member VMac Attack. He says, "What's up, guys? We listened to his GBC walk-up song earlier. Thank you for providing for that for us, VMac Attack." Bethany Wright has a question for you guys. She says her 13-year-old T-Full son and she are running a small loop at a local show by themselves. Any tips for setting up a first-time loop? She knows that's a broad question, and unfortunately, she missed the advice we've given so far. But what Rafe was just talking about, if I can sum up real quick what they've said, and they'll elaborate better on this because they're the experts. Make sure everything's tested at home for a very long time before you do so. They've got some examples. If you want to look back at this video later, Jeremy showed how to take one module and put a recycler in it. So you can set one module aside and test that one at a time if you don't have room to set up the entire loop. If you do have room to set up the loop, you want to run it for a minimum of 8 hours, I believe is what I heard from them, just to make sure, A, it runs without jamming. B, you've got, as Rafe was just saying, you've got it built in a way that's not putting too much stress on the bricks, doesn't burn through motors quickly, doesn't burn through gears quickly. I know that's one big problem GBC has had in the past. The people who do this at the expos and the convention center is the fact that they don't make the power functions motors anymore. You burn through those things. You're burning through your life blood. And I know that there's a lot of discussion out there on what to replace those with. We've got an influx of comments coming in, which we'll get to. But I just want you guys to respond to Bethany real quick. Any more advice for her as she's setting up for her first time GBC loop that she's doing with just her and her son?
If you've got some Lego train track, make sure you put a fence around the table so all your balls don't end up on the floor. Or do something else for a fence. The fence is always a good thing.
Yeah, and anytime you're doing any presentation off-site, and this counts as one of those things, get there early. Set up under relaxed conditions. Don't try to rush it. Take your time. And if something doesn't work, just say, you know what, doesn't always work, and take your time trying to fix it, because it can get very stressful. But people are generally very, very polite, very understanding when things don't go quite according to plan. So whatever you do, don't panic. Panic will not help.
Yeah, going back to Mark's comment about Grand Rapids, my Ferris wheel, which you'll see later, was being very cantankerous that show. Turns out it was partly due to the warp table it was on, but I at one point had to shut the whole loop down to work on the Ferris wheel. So I'm in a chair with my back to the crowd outside the loop, and I'm working on it. And people are walking up and asking questions. You just stop and answer the questions, and don't stress out trying to fix it and talk at the same time. Just stop working, answer the questions, because that's important, and then go back to work getting your module fixed, and you'll get there.
Mark's on mute here, but I can.
Can I keep typing? I just want to show this real quick, Bethany.
Yeah.
This is what he's talking about when he says, "Get yourself some train track." This is what he actually. This is a visual of what he's describing to you. This fence in front of your modules will stop some of the balls from falling off the table and encourage people not to reach over to help you fix some of the jams or move some of the balls.
And if you can put a soft tablecloth underneath, it does wonders for reducing the noise, and the balls don't roll as far.
And they don't bounce as high.
Yeah.
Honestly, those tablecloths you see right there are terry cloth. So even if you have a bunch of towels, you can bring it. May help you. It may not look great, but people will be looking at the machines and not at the full presentation. So
True statement.
Yeah.
Mark got another one right.
yeah, look at me. Let me see if I can do this, Ben. I can. Hey.
Yeah, a couple other little bits of advice before we move on to this module, which I think is based on a Lego set that I never got, but was always beautiful. Lego 48 suggests maybe trying to keep it to a single table so it's easier to monitor. And Ben says take some shims to level the tables.
Definitely do that.
Yeah, we heard earlier, 8 hours was sort of Mark's suggestion for how long you should run one of these. We also heard a crazy number suggested by Ray, being able to transport or move 40,000 balls reliably.
Yeah.
Understanding, of course, that that's unrealistic, but just an idea there.
In all fairness, when I suggested testing it for 8 hours, Jeremy did kind of scoff and say, yeah, at a minimum. It's Kevin Builds is here, and he says, if you want to use those new tread links, he'd recommend getting used ones from Bricklink. The ones from Lego Pick-a-Brick recently have had loose connections between each link and are prone to snapping. Ooh, good to know, Kevin Builds. Thank you for letting us know that, because they use those.
Did not know that.
Yeah. Did you bring this comment up, Ben?
No.
Lego 48. Okay, I'll go through these two real quick. Lego 48 does a one-person loop every year at Air and Scare. It's one 6-foot table with no fences or barriers and lots of kids. It takes about 3 hours to set up the whole loop. Most of the modules are in front with 1 or 2 longer outruns for the return along the back. That's a great one-table setup. We had one like that at Holiday Joy this year from, what is his name? Ben Merrill. It was quite beautiful. VMAX says, I'm sorry, it's Kevin Build. Sorry. It says Train Track is definitely a cheaper solution to using the 8x8 grill plates. Lego 48 says, for tablecloth, I use a 6.5 length of fleece fabric from Joann Fabrics. That's a good way to do it as well.
Yep.
I'll get to some of these others in a minute. I don't want to just go through.
Jeremy, let's talk about this one.
Guest talk, exactly, because this is a monster.
Yeah. So this is, as mentioned, based on the set that came out, I don't know, what's it, like 8 years ago, maybe it's longer than that. I don't know. Time flies.
Yeah.
But when the set came out, I think every GBCer saw this and said, that's a GBC module. And it does require some modification from the original set. As far as I know, I was the first one to actually turn it into a GBC functional module. Basically, I went out and bought it the day it came out. I built it according to instructions, and then I went through and said, okay, what needs to change? And there were a couple of things with this. One was that the official build, it's got the motor all the way up here, and that was going through a drivetrain that went all the way down the length of this to spin this wheel. And it also went down into the base of this and back up again to spin this secondary conveyor. and it was just such a long gear train that it really didn't run for very long before things started getting stuck. So I just removed that. I put a new motor right down there, right at the wheel, and another new motor right at that conveyor.
Yeah, Jeremy had excellent memory. Bucket Wheel Excavator 42055 was released in 2016.
All right.
So about eight and a half years ago here. So this, yeah, if I recall, wasn't this the entire thing, all the functions? Didn't it just use a single motor in that original set?
Yeah, it was just one motor,
Yeah.
and then there were these switches that activate basically just like the gear shift in some of the fancier Technic cars that dictates where the power went, and it could it could turn the conveyor belt to actually drive the vehicle, or turn this large platform as a big turntable so it could spin around. And it was a cool set. For sure, and some cool functions, but they did try to do a little bit too much with one motor.
Yeah, and on something like this with the reliability, you don't need it to be overpowered. You need it to be functional, right? So that's what we're always shooting for here.
Another modification I needed. You see these light gray bumpers on this secondary conveyor. Those were not in the original set. They had them on the first conveyor, but I think they omitted them because it's very tight underneath there, and I needed to redesign the underside to make sure that those all fit through. But if you don't have those, the balls just roll backwards.
Cool.
This was not, the set was not designed with balls in mind. It came with, I think, some of the round bricks that have enough angles to them that they can still get caught by that conveyor without the bumpers.
Did you ever consider the red punch-in treads that go on those tracks, Jeremy?
Well, they still would have had issue making the clearance on the underside, but I think you'd still have problems with balls rolling backwards on those, but I didn't try it.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, it looks like the original set came with 40 1x1 dark bluish gray round bricks that were used instead of the balls. So the balls, because they're more spherical, would just roll back down the hill without the extra work in there.
Yeah.
So very cool. What's the next module we've got here?
So this one I call binomial, and we've got a long conveyor in the back that carries the balls up to the top, and then they go into this randomizer.
The Plinko board, as we would call it.
Yes.
Yes.
And then they collect in this bin at the bottom. And the idea here is when you have enough balls collected in there, you see a bell curve of a binomial distribution. So most of the balls are going to end up in that center bin, and you only get a couple balls in these outer bins. In order to get one in one of the very far bins, you need to watch about 1,000 balls go through here, assuming that this randomizer is truly random.
That's awesome.
And it's pretty good at randomizing. I did a lot of testing to figure out how random it is.
There it goes.
Wow.
Yeah. So what causes the trigger there for it to drop?
So this one is being controlled by one of these EV3s, the Lego Mindstorms, and it's got a timer. So you can see it's a 100-second timer. It's counting down. And when it gets to 0, we've got this little spinner thing at the top that goes 3, 2, 1.
Oh, cool.
And then they all dump. So talking about design considerations, this is not the sort of module that I would recommend someone do for their very first GBC.
Right.
But basically, when I was designing this, I broke it down into pieces. And as Brian mentioned earlier in the video, one of the parts of the GBC standard is the module needs to be able to accept 30 balls at once. This will obviously dump significantly more than 30 balls at once. So this part here is technically part of the same module. And all that's doing is it's capable. I can just dump huge handfuls of balls into this, and it will slowly space them out so that the next machine doesn't get overloaded. So I built that part first. So I wanted to make sure I could actually get that working before I put all this effort into building something that wouldn't be compatible with anyone else.
That's great.
And the next thing I worked on was this randomizer.
There it goes.
Here it's going to dump.
Tee, that's so satisfying.
And
So-
you see when it shoots, it goes out both sides, so it doesn't overwhelm everything.
Yep.
So some of them get recycled in there. They don't
Yeah.
all end up at the next module thing.
So if, in case there's kids who are watching because they want to see the next countdown or the next drop, they don't have to wait too long in case there's a jam behind it or it's not loading up as fast if it didn't have that dumping both ways. That's pretty ingenious, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never
So,
seen another one like it.
so part of the dumping both ways also, since half of the balls recirculate, it basically has twice as many balls inside the bucket as it would if it was passing everything along. So if you have one ball coming into this machine every second and one ball coming out every second, and it takes 100 seconds before it dumps, if they all went on, you'd have 100 balls in here. But since half of them recirculate, you'll have 200 balls in there. And that allows it to get a much more defined bell curve show up. It's also much more exciting for the kids to see when 200 balls all dump at once.
That's really great stuff, man. Just to catch up on some of these comments as we're working on transition into our next our next GBC engineer. We've got one right here. It says, is there some sort of lock on the trap door? Is the EV3 motor holding all the weight of the balls? That's a question for you, Jeremy.
That is a great question, yes. So on the other side, so there's a couple of weighted bricks. So that's balancing the load. And then there's the EV motor on the other side that is actually doing the turning.
Okay.
Servo motor there, it looks like. I guess I'm not as familiar with the EV3 motors, but it must be able to turn just a quarter turn or whatever.
It does have a rotation sensor built into the machine, so it knows when it's down and when it's back up.
All right. Yeah, not a servo motor, but acting like a servo motor for this purpose.
Yeah.
So from the chat, we have a comment from Ben, more advice for Bethany for her upcoming show. Non-slip drawer liners also work great for tabletop material. Kevin Builds also says those drawer liners are good for packing as well. So that's a double bit of advice there for you. Lego 48 says you absolutely have to have spare modules in case something fails. Usually have 2 spare ball pumps because of the flexibility. I can use them to replace anything. That's what they usually have at the Brickworld shows, is like a nice big workspace in the center in case they've got to do some surgery on a module, and it's usually filled with replacement modules that they can do really quickly. And when in doubt, just have a bucket that the balls can fall into and you can recycle by hand until you get that module fixed. Lego 48 says, parenthetically, sorry, that should have been 2.5 yards of fabric, which covers a 6-foot table. All good, man. Thank you for the advice. Appreciate that a lot. Rob Claxton, channel member, is here. Don Sablota is here. She's saying someday goals. She wants to be I've built halves of GBC modules as well. Let's see. All right, and we are caught up. Andrew Kratz says thank you to Brian for letting him know where he can see Rafe Donahue at a show next. All right, so if we are looking to transition to the next person, is that everything you wanted to show us today, Jeremy? Or anybody else have questions for Jeremy from the panel here? Well, thank you, sir, for showing us those modules. They're rather ingenious. They're very unique to most of the modules that I see. So thanks for sharing your work, your creativity, and your brain with us today, because that's some great stuff. Want to bring this up because there is a Great Ball Contraption website. You can find it at greatballcontraption.com, and this is the page that has all the GBC instructions that Jeremy was talking about earlier. These are the instructions from all of the official Brickworld Great Ball Contraption workshop sets that you can join in at the show and be part of this and meet some of the people and have a great presentation about getting started in Great Ball Contraption at the Brickworld Convention in Chicago. Yes, sir.
Yeah, while you have that page up, Mark.
Yeah.
Just so people know, there's a lot of places you can get GBC instructions. You don't have to go to greatballcontraption.com.
Absolutely.
But beware, not all GBC instructions online were made equal. A lot of them, you'll buy them, you'll put it together, and then you'll find out you spend days troubleshooting it to make it reliable enough to do to a show. So a lot of modules you'll buy will run for 5 minutes and look great, but then you'll find out what's wrong with them.
Yeah, and that's the biggest point you could take is if you're going to go and do a show, make sure you test it for more than 5 minutes, especially if you bought instructions from somewhere online, even if you're doing instructions from greatballcontraption.com. I mean, these are tested, and the workshop set so they can go directly into the show. So they are very well tested and they should work very well, but who knows what kind of mistakes can be made along the way of creating it. So even these that you're getting from this site, please make sure that you test before you put into a show somewhere and bring them to an active GBC loop. My Chrome is hanging. Otherwise, I would show you the instructions that Jeremy was talking about earlier with the ball pump, but you can see it down here in the second row, second from the right over here, this gray ball pump module. That's the one he was referring to earlier. Copper Valor is here. Thank you for joining us. Brick Engineering is also here. Appreciate you guys being here today for this special presentation about the Great Ball Contraption. Let's check this out. Who's up next? We're going to talk to Rafe next. Welcome, Rafe, to the stage, please, if I can get that done myself. I don't know. Yep, here we go. You guys ready to go, or do you need a couple more seconds?
I think we're ready to go, Mark. Thank you very much.
Awesome. You're welcome. Thank you for being here, sir.
All right. Well, it's my pleasure. So we're going to show you here. Brian's running the camera, and I have the pointy stick. Here's a little lesson for doing a show: is have a stick, and this has a stick with a little hook on the end. And this may seem like a silly thing, but if you are reaching into your ball contraption to get a ball or something like that, and you have something important like a stick, it kind of tells the audience that this is not to be reached in with hands, and that tends to keep kids. It tends to keep the kids out of there. So that's a good thing there.
I guarantee you it doesn't seem silly to anybody who's worked a GBC loop before. I've helped you guys out at the shows, and I love that thing. If you could do me a quick favor, Brian, if you could do a close-up on that against the table so that people can see kind of the parts that it's made of, and it's exactly kind of like, yeah, so you build a little bit of a right angle so that you have a long reach and a sticky thing.
The 32-length axle is all that is.
Yep.
Nice. Perfect. Thank you.
Brian's getting I'm here at Brian's house, okay? And so we have, I drove up this morning and we got things hooked up, and his modules are over there. This is approximately, I think it's seven official modules here that have been built and have stuck with me over the last almost 20 years. I was at the first Brick Fest GBC in 2005, and one of these modules has components that were at that show. So we'll get around to that. Let's start, Brian. We'll start on this side. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Or do you want
to fire them all up?
Yeah. I'm going to talk about this one first, and then we'll fire it up because it's a little complicated to see when it's going. So this is the one that always gets the most action. This is a 13-bit gravity-powered binary ball counter. It's a mechanical machine. It's a mechanical adding machine that adds 1 every time you drop a ball in there. And there's the main piece of this is a little switch like this. It would be called a flip flop, and you drop a ball in there, and there is in there a little lever. The ball lands on the lever and flips the switch, so that the next ball when it comes in flips the switch the other way. So this will go back and forth. Here's a cutaway of this guy. So the ball will come in and land on this little tongue here and flip the switch one way. And the next ball will come in and land on this side and flip it the other way. And the ball will go opposite sides. So there are 13 of these bits, these binary bits on the machine, and they're lined up here from the 1 bit all the way down. These are powers of 2, as you can see, all the way down here to 2 to the 13th, which is 8,192. Wow. So what will happen when the first ball comes into the machine, when we turn it on, the first ball, this thing starts at 0. And the ball will come in and flip it over here to 1, and then that ball will exit the machine. The second ball will come in, also go into this bit. It'll flip it back to 0, but that ball will go into the second bit and flip that guy to 2. So that means there's 2 balls. The third ball will come in and flip this guy back to 1. 1 plus 2 is, of course, 3. The fourth ball will come in, flip this guy back to 0, flip this guy back to 0, and flip this guy to 4. So it's counting as it's adding 1, and it's counting as the balls are coming through. And this is not a random process. This is a completely deterministic process. If you view the balls as which bits will it hit. You can do it in that sense, in a random sense, but this is just a ball counter, and it will count from 0 all the way up to 8,192 before it resets.
Nice.
And just so people understand, so that's at 4. If that was at 2 and that was at 1, that would mean we have 7. So you add up all the numbers down the line.
Right. And so at the end of the day, when things get exciting, all of these will be flipped over to the on position. And when a ball goes into the machine at that state, back out just a little bit, this ball will go all the way down to the bottom. And that ball will get caught here in the little cage to indicate that we've reset it one time. So it will take several hours to go through all the 8,192 combinations, and then we will catch the ball in there, and that tells us that it has been reset. So at the end of the show, we've run 8 hours every day, and we're running, maybe a ball every 2 seconds. Then we may get 2 or 3 balls there in the cage by the end of the show.
All right, so you're being actually'd by Lego 48, and I don't know how to read that algebraic expression, so I'm just going to leave that up there so you can watch the stream back later and see if...
2 to the 14th, 16,383.
2,000 to the 14th is that we have 13 bits, so but yes, the next one would be that. And the question is, do you want to make it bigger? And I had to draw the line somewhere. My original plan was to put 16 bits on here, and then I did the math, and I realized we would not get to 65,000 balls over the course of a weekend. So I stopped at 13 because that gave me something that would be reachable, but very rare in the course of a 2-day show.
Awesome. It's Kevin Builds wonders, is this more accurate than Tom's counter?
Yes.
Well, it's only as accurate as the balls it doesn't drop.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Every ball. So what is it counting? Okay, it's not counting the balls that go into the hopper because sometimes they fall out on the ramp up. It's
right.
Not, so it's counting the balls that fall into this first bit.
Gotcha.
Right? It can't get the count wrong unless somehow somebody changes the. If somebody changes the count, it'll be wrong. Physically changes it. If somebody drops an extra ball in there, it'll be wrong. But it's an adding machine. So if I wanted to add numbers other than 1 each time, I could set this thing. I could say I want to take 90 and I want to add 13 to it. So I can set this to 90. I can take 64 plus 16 gives me 80. That's 90. Okay, 64 plus 16 plus 8 plus 2 is 90. And I want to add 13 to that. Well, 13 is 8 plus 4 plus 1. So if I take 3 balls and I drop one of them here in the 8 and one in the 4 and one in the 1, that's the total. That is 103. That is right? 90 plus 13?
64 plus 32 is 96.
We're mathing.
Plus 4 is 100. Plus 2 plus 1.
It's 103. So it's an adding machine. So that's kind of fun. It's a binary adding machine, and it adds 1 every time because the machine only drops balls here in the red one in the first bit. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting is that half the balls that go through this module go down this red column. Half the ones that remain go down the blue column. So 3 out of every 4 balls goes down either red or blue. Right? So
Yep.
3 out of 4 goes down here. 7 out of 8 go in red, white, or blue. 15 out of 16 go through these first 4 of them. So only 1 out of every 16 balls goes this far or farther. So it takes twice as many to get to the next one every time. Okay, because when the ball clicks it over, all the other ones are reset back to 0 and has to refill those. So
Excellent.
You can learn a lot of stuff about binary mathematics by building one of these and studying it in your basement.
Breaking my brain.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so this is the binary adding machine. It has been around since 2005. There have been a number of adjustments to it, mostly to the mechanics that lift the ball at the beginning or lift it at the end. There's 2 lifts involved because I'm a bad designer. There's an input hopper here with one of those lifts that Jeremy warned us about. This used to have 2 bars on each side, but they would tend to fall out. So I put this little rail down the middle. This is it has vestigial pieces from all the different versions that it was up into that. The balls get dropped into the top here, and they go through a little turnstile to run one at a time. The only real problem with the mechanism is if you drop 2 balls at once into the top hopper, they will jam. This
Okay.
can jam, so this thing slows it down, so we only get 1 per time in there. And
Nice.
then at the end, here's another thing to avoid is do not let the ball get down to the level of the table. If it gets down to the level of the table, it's very hard to scoop it back up. I have a lift here that will scrape it off the table and then lift it up the backside and drop it out. So that's the binary ball counter. Should we turn this on, Brian, do you think?
Well, I said, before we do that, I just caution anyone doing this kind of lift that Rafe has here, they really like to jam.
Yes, they do.
They really like to jam. So there's something to be avoided if you can.
Yes. So
Yeah. And speaking of
we're gonna turn
caution,
go ahead, Mark.
as Lego 48 says, if you are doing one of the workshop modules from the Great Ball Contraption website, they are tested to be reliable as is, but if you modify a workshop module to use it differently than originally designed, then bad things can happen. And Ethan McCain has joined us. Thank you for being here, Ethan. Go ahead, guys.
All
All right. Where do you want the train controller set?
Put it at 3. Okay.
Yep.
Well, we can watch this go now.
All right. We're going to go back over and let you see the binary counter run. Watch the little levers. There, it just went to 1. Next ball that comes in will cause the 2 to flip. You see the balls working their way down as they get to the higher
Yeah.
numbers.
Cool.
So that's the binary ball counter. People seem to like
fun.
that. The kids seem to enjoy that. And when things get toward the end and it's going to go all the way down, there's always a big crowd that shows up to watch the 8,192nd ball get caught in the little cage.
Nice.
So the lift takes it and runs it down this. This is an extendable ramp. And here's an example if you're putting on a show by yourself. If you ever have ramps, you can make them variable lengths to get around tables and stuff like that. This typically only goes out about this far, but I add a little piece here to make it fit better on this table. This is a more recent module of mine. It's just these little, I don't know what are these called, these conveyor belt buckets, and I put it on one of those tread things,
Oh,
and
nice.
it picks them up and dumps them down the top side.
Now,
That's
something interesting to
ingenious.
note on this is you see how Rafe's tread kind of hangs down underneath?
Yes.
When you use these treads, you don't want to put them too tight around their sprockets because they tend to get gummy and then they start to jump. So you want those hanging a little loose when you're using those as a conveyor lift.
If you look here, you will see a little bit of agitation as the bucket comes around and goes
Yeah.
flat, and it flips that little tongue in case there's a little jam up here. This is an example of another thing to avoid. This is a funnel at the end of a ramp.
Yeah.
It can produce a ball bridge or a blockage. The agitation here and the offset of the funnel helps alleviate that.
Hey, Rafe, since we had like 20 people join us since the last time we spoke about an agitator, can you please explain again what an agitator is?
The idea of the agitator is to keep the balls moving and have them avoid getting stuck in a position where nobody can get past them. The fact that this is bouncing a little bit every time each little bucket goes through, that prohibits the balls from getting locked in a position.
Shake them loose.
It shakes them loose. So anything that you can do to do that is a good thing.
Yeah, along
Great
those
description.
lines,
Thank you.
Rafe's inbox doesn't have a lot of slope to it. And that's usually not a good thing either because balls tend to get out of there slower and then they tend to jam up more. So if you can get a little more slope in your inbox, that's always helpful.
Part of the issue here is these buckets ride so close to the ground that going much lower gets to be a problem. Certainly if there's a terry cloth, tablecloth here, this is an issue. So it's, pick your poison. Agitators help avoid that, but there's always a possibility for problems. The ball ends up pretty high. This little thing takes some of the energy out of the ball as it falls down. And then it goes into one of the prototype GBC workshop modules from 2014.
This is the only module that's not on the website. We don't have the instructions for this. We don't know what happened to them.
Yeah, I don't even know how I make it. All right, so what you can do here, and most people don't know this, is this thing is designed. The pivot point here is right here where the pulley is. if I pull out this white pin, I can reset it here. There's a 3, 4, 5 Pythagorean triangle thing going on, and you can reset it here to get it a little bit longer and a little bit flatter if you would want such a thing. So it can be adjusted on the fly.
Nice.
All right. Here is a
Foosball.
it's a foosball table,
Super foosball.
and this actually got nominated for a mechanical thing back at Brickworld, and it's just a series of these guys flipping around and kicking the ball either way. They go around the outside and then they come down the out here. The legs here on these guys are not real legs. These are just 1x3
Arms, thin left arms. Yep.
yeah, half arms. And if you don't do that, when the legs come down, it can pin the ball against the tabletop and the whole thing will jam up. So having the legs be flexible there prohibits the jamming and still gives you enough energy to move the ball back and forth.
Well, that's how you get all the force on your foosball shots. But of course, here that's not the goal.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah. So this is I don't think you want to.
Yeah.
This is for entertainment purposes only. There should be no wagering. Right?
Yeah.
This next little ramp, I call this the salmon run because it reminds me of fish on film stream. And
Makes sense.
this is part of my original 2005 GBC gigantic module that I had, and there are some of these rubber treads from Technic
Mindstorm sets.
Yeah, and they are very old. There's 4 big old Lego motors powering it at very slow speed, and the balls tend to roll. They get carried up, and then they hit, and then they bounce back. But their friends help them get along, and eventually, if there's a critical mass, they will get their way up there. If we let the ball volume drop very low, the balls will tend to sit in these positions here at the intersections.
Yeah.
Here and here and here. And eventually it will clear itself, but it can take hours for those balls to go up on their own.
So it's kind of a conveyor and a ball pump at the same time.
What was that?
It's kind of a conveyor and a ball pump at the same time.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, they are. It is a pump in that they push each other up the hill. And there are a couple places where the balls will stop, but their friends will come along and push them on to the next module. The next one is a version of the GBC 2018. The only difference I made to this one is I added a counterweight to the outside of that module to make it smoother in its running. That way it doesn't jump as much, because this lifting plate in the middle tends to produce a little bounce.
I've seen a lot of these used at the expos, and they are very hoppy.
Yeah, so I added this counterweight on the outside. So
Smart.
So this is an example of doing less work and being easier on the motor. It doesn't have to lift hard and then fall. It just kind of it smooths out the motion.
And you notice the counterweight is 180 degrees out of phase with the lifting arm.
Yeah.
And that's easy to do with the Lego pieces.
It is.
Right, and then the last one here is another one of those modules I talked about before. You can pull this pin out again and change the orientation of this tongue. And there's no reason this tongue couldn't be longer. I have a version of this back at home where the ramp is probably close to 40 studs long, and I use that sometime on shows to give me a big tall lift and give me a really long run down the backside of the table.
And then we're back around to his counter module. And I'll go to the inbox on this because it's a perfect example of somewhere you couldn't do a 30 ball dump.
Right.
I don't think that inbox can hold 30 balls. So technically it's not a legal module, but
unless you consider this one, unless you consider this part of this module.
That's right. Then it's all one big module. Right.
Yeah.
And you notice, as we talked before, you don't want inboxes to get narrower as they go down. You see how this one's the same width the whole way through. That way it doesn't get jams.
Yeah. It's Kevin Builds brought up a standard that he uses for creating an agitator. He says if you have balls going from, say, 6 bricks of wiggle room to a single line, 2 bricks wide, an agitator is necessary. So if there's like a little funnel effect or a possibility for a bottleneck, an agitator is necessary. So you just used a lot of terms there. You said inbox. You said, I don't know, there were a couple other things that were said. You said a legal module. Can you talk a little bit about what makes a module legal? What are the standards? What are the names of these parts of the set of the modules? So anybody who's seeing this for the first time or just getting started, so they know the vernacular of the GBC, can you go through some of those for us, please?
So sure. So first of all, you can find the spec for the Great Ball Contraption at greatballcontraption.com. The spec has several pages to it, but it all boils down to a few things. You have to have an inbox, as Jeremy described earlier. It's 10 studs by 10 studs and 10 bricks tall. You have to put the balls into the next guy's inbox. So your output has to be at least 10 studs up, but not a lot higher than that, or else you'll be throwing balls all over the place. And you have to move balls individually at 1 ball per second, or you can move them in a batch of up to 30 balls, and then batched up at however many seconds as balls in the batch. So you can have a batch dump every 30 seconds, and if you're getting fed at 30 balls for 30 seconds, then you're going to put out 30 balls. So that works. Your inbox needs to be able to hold at least the 30 ball batch, the dump. And finally, your input, your inbox, and your output have to be in alignment on the table. So you can't have an inbox here and then your output over here, because that makes a zigzag in the middle of the loop, and that's sometimes very hard to deal with because you only have so much table width.
Yeah. For those of you who want to know more about that or see that again on your own without having to watch the entire video back, I went ahead and dropped the link for the page Brian was referring to in the chat. And once the video is done, we will go ahead and add that to the description as well, along with the GBC instructions that Jeremy and Brian and Rafe have referenced so far.
Mark, I'm going to mention that you said somebody had a comment about if you go from 6 wide down to 2 wide, you need to have an agitator. Another way to achieve that is to change direction of flow. So if I'm running in this direction 6 wide, I can go to 2 studs wide by changing the direction. So if they flow to the end and then you have a sufficient slope there, they'll go in there and then they will go down and they'll be lined up. So there's a way around that. I've done that on a couple, mostly at home when I'm just building return modules for testing and stuff like that.
But you got to have enough drop in the inbox.
You got to have enough drop, right? So you can do it without an agitator, but it's going to cost you in vertical drop, and that's up to you to decide how you deal with that. But if you can get them linear, then they tend to flow pretty well, but that can be difficult to do.
Awesome. Thank you. It's Kevin Builds is suggesting an amendment to the GBC standard document. It says something to mention that is not listed in the standard, but the GBC community has come to adhere to is that the 9-volt train regulator dial should be always turned to the right. I think it's a little more advanced. I think starting with the basics is what the standard does, but I think that's definitely what I've seen as well. It makes it a lot easier when you've got media there and you're like, hey, get these going. I'm like, okay, right.
Yeah, but that's part of setup at the show. That's not the module design. Yeah. Right, because you have reversing switches and everything else. So that's just all in how you want to set up at the show. That's really not a module design spec. Yeah,
maybe there should be an operator spec as
operator's manual.
Yeah. So as Kevin said, as I just said, when I've got to turn the GBC on myself because I've got media there, he says that makes it easier for people to run your modules without playing the guessing game of which way to turn it. That makes a lot of sense to me. Turn it.
Oh, absolutely. Right, and we always try to set them up that way. I'm not disputing that. That's literally what we do. I'm just saying that really is not a module spec. Now, one of the things that I've done is if you didn't notice on this table, Rafe was using NXTs to run his GBC modules for the most part. All right, if I can figure out how this camera works, there it is. So I've written a program that runs the 3 different motors, and I don't know how well we can zoom in on that and still be able to see it.
Yeah, it's running the first 2 in reverse and the third and forward.
Right. There's your ABC motors. And you can adjust the settings for each of those. So if I say if you see the bottom line says edit A, I'll go into edit A, and I can change the direction from reverse to forward. And then once I've gone back to the main screen, that is now saved. So if I stop the program and then restart it, I'm right back where I started. So once you set up your modules and gotten your loop all put together, you can simply stop and start the thing without having to actually give any thought to it whatsoever. So if you have spare NXTs lying around, I do intend to make this code available. I need to write some instructions on how to use it. I did give it to someone to use in the last couple weeks, and she's trying it out to see if she can figure it all out and make it work for her. So if I make that available, hopefully people can use some NXTs, because train controllers, quite frankly, are the way of the dodo. Well, for that matter, so are NXTs, but they're not quite as the way of the dodo.
Yeah, we should set up a sub channel on our public Discord channel for GBC discussions, or talk about it later. And fun times. If you watch this back, you guys can see me actually trying to look around the corner of Brian's phone to see the screen, because I tried to do that, which is I'm not the smartest one on the panel. Jeremy, go ahead. Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I just wanted to mention, because we brought up the train controllers, this is a good point for people who want to join the GBC for the first time, and they're wondering how are they going to power their model. We at Brickworld will provide all the train controllers necessary to run the loop. So if you build your module with the power function motors or with the older 9-volt motors, we can power them. You don't need to worry about how you're going to power them. If you do use the Mindstorms motors or the newer powered up motors, because we don't have right adapter cables for those, you'd need to figure out how to power them yourself. But those power function motors, or even the third party clone power function motors that you can get, still they're very available, and we can make it work.
Another thing.
Yeah, come over here. We're in front of the camera. Yeah. Oh, you were going to show something. Here we go. Sorry, guys.
Along the line of extra motors, you don't have to have one motor driving one module. You can set up. Here's an example of a component that I use sometimes to run multiple modules that have the same setup. The idea is just create. I guess I'll call it a physical power bus. It's just there's a rotational axle somewhere along here that can go as far as you need it to go, and you can tie off of that of that motion to drive whatever module you need. The original plan for the 2016 module that we showed had that has that option. This one you can see there's an output here that I can extend to another module that has the same setup and orientation for where the power goes in. So if you're clever with how you sequence your modules and use the same motor for multiple modules, you can get by with fewer motors and therefore fewer train controllers and fewer wires and those sorts of things. So you can extend your energy mechanically and not necessarily electrically if you need that.
It's Kevin Builds brings us some good advice if you're interested in it. Andy Bell has a similar program to Brian's to use on the Technic-Hub with Pybricks and powered up motors.
Excellent. Good.
Yeah. All right. So anything else you want to show us from Race Loop before we move on to Paul?
I think that's it. Thanks a lot, Mark.
Hey, you're welcome. Thank you for being here. All right. So we've got Paul up next. And Paul, if you're ready to go, we can go ahead and bring you up on the big old screen here. Paul is set up at a church today, and he's got a lot of people that are interested in what he's doing. So we may have a little bit of extra audio noise, but we can hear Paul over it, which is the great news. And we've got some really fun stuff going.
Paul's going to have to unmute his mic.
Yeah, you have to unmute it on your side first.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, unmute your mic, please, sir.
You got to find the right button. While he's getting that fixed, which will hopefully only take a second.
There it goes. Hey,
there we go. Remember, you can, of course,
Hello, everyone.
subscribe to Brickworld and get more fun stuff like this.
You sure can.
So, Paul, you're up in Grand Forks. Is that where you are today?
Grand Forks, North Dakota, at
All right.
Hope Church. We had a first Lego League today, and that is finishing up. So, kind of
cool. Well, we can hear the machine running. So, what do you got to show us, Paul?
All right. Well, we're going to go look at this one right down here. That is Brickworld Chicago 2004 workshop module. And right after that is a module I made, Zigzag. I made that in 2020.
Oh,
So,
very
Paul, what
cool.
are your cautions about modules like that?
This one I should call raspberry because it jams all the time.
But what caused it to jam? It's there's a lot of gear synchronization required on that.
Right down here, the ball sometimes just ends up going in at the wrong time as that white arm comes around.
What if your white arms get out of sync?
They are all in sync because of the gears on the back. They're all connected.
Right, but how often do they actually get out of sync? Because that's one of the problems with synchronized modules. I'm just cautioning against synchronized modules being more complicated.
Yeah, well, you got the black gears here that all touch, and they do not. The gears always are in time with each other. It's just when the first initial ball comes in is where the jam happens.
Yeah, if you get a gear slippage, you might have problems. Maybe the size of those particular gears and whatever ones you have in between are helping keep them in sync. But it's always something you've got to be wary of. They have to be the same size gear in between each one in order for all of the little teeth to spin at the same time. And you don't want any of them to get off. But it's a very cool looking module for sure.
So for the agitator in this one, I'm just using a Technic brick with an axle. And that takes the ramp and lifts the ramp up and down a little bit. So that's what clears out the jams on the bin. But the initial.
So but Paul, there are a lot of people. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of this now. A lot of people probably don't realize there's actually a flat spot on the Lego balls. So for some reason, you have a little bit of a line of balls in that ramp, and it's so shallow. One ball can get on its flat spot, and it can screw the entire thing up. And that's what the agitator is really good for, right there.
Yes, good point.
I have a question about that agitator there, since it's a Technic brick with an axle hole that's turning. Does that brick itself have a tendency to wear down over time, like the corners of it round off, or is that something you ever need to replace? Is the actual brick? Is that something that wears down like a gear does?
That brick is not a problem, but the U-joints, universal joints going to it tend to wear out. And okay. I can show you some Lego pixie dust on the gears in the back.
Yeah, little plastic, some ABS dust from the gears grinding. Yep. Yeah, I think that probably tends to happen a little more when it's grinding or stuck. But even running smoothly, it'll cause some mess.
Well, we have discovered that Lego dust is not a lubricant.
Yeah. No. Certainly not.
That is beautiful. I will say, just in general, my initial reaction to a lot of GBC modules is, from a design standpoint, I would say, I would put more color into this. Now, we're talking a lot about modules today that were built, some 15 to 20 years ago, where there wasn't a lot of bulk brick available in some of these more interesting colors. So if you built something like Rafe's ball counter, back then, like, really, if you wanted bulk brick, it had to be in the basic colors. But I do appreciate this, that being said, in that you have gone with some more color theory than a good number of GBC designers choose to build with. No offense to those who don't.
Yeah, well, and actually, before we move on, I was trying to ask Jeremy this, and then my screen froze. But, he has a very colorful one in front of him there, too. I'm going to pull Jeremy up here for solo view so you can see it there, right to his right. Our right, his left. And that was the very first one he ever did. So I was going to ask Jeremy before I froze, do you leave it this way for nostalgia purposes, or to tell people this is the first one you had, or do you ever get the itch to unify the colors or make it prettier, for a lack of a better word?
Yeah, for this one, I pretty much just leave it as it is. It's some historic nature to it, I guess. If I were to start messing around with it, I would want to totally redesign it and change some of the mechanical aspects of it as well. So
perhaps, yeah, you know better than to try to mess with it and just say, well, it's what it is. It's the way I built it. If I start going down that path, I can't stop. So I'm just going to leave it like it is. So that's a fair way to look at it.
You got two mock builders here, so we had to ask some design questions. Apologies.
Oh yes, yeah.
Oh yeah.
But I'm notorious for having ugly modules that kind of work most of the time, and I'm in full agreement with Jeremy. Is once it gets working, if it's even close, trying to mess. And I've built another ball counter like this, and I tried to make it look nicer and work better, and it didn't. Either one, it didn't necessarily look better, and it didn't work any better. So I just kept the original there. And I keep telling myself every time I'm at a show is I will rebuild this or that or some other part by the time the next show rolls around. And by the time you get them into the boxes and you get back home, the rest of your life takes over.
Yeah.
And then it's time for another show. So
yeah,
that's,
every Lego
that's the
fan goes
reality.
through that for sure. Yeah.
So Paul, to keep the balls in zigzag here, is the zigzag ramp angled backwards at all?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Come on this side and take a look. So this is level with earth, and then this is just brought back with a couple pins in order to get that angle.
Yeah, just a few degrees to keep it from flying out. If it was vertical, you'd have a big problem there. So
I do
just
believe
little
I should,
engineering, practical
I do
engineering
believe I
issues.
should go back a few more degrees because this one likes the spitballs.
And that upper inbox Paul has there is a perfect example of what Rafe was talking about earlier about lining balls up. He's got slope. It goes into a single column that changes direction.
I see what you mean. That is a great example of. Now I know exactly what he was saying.
What I like to do is have the output ramp in the inbox on one side instead of having two ramps going to the same spot.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Less chance of getting jammed up.
All right. Well, what do we have after zigzag here? I see another blue and purple contraption here that's stepping some balls up.
I do forget the name of it, but it's a Brickworld Chicago 2023
The Wave
module.
The wave. Okay.
Thank you, Brian.
So Ben has a question here real quick. He says, what would it take to have a pack of Lego soccer balls for GBC as a swag bag item for convention attendees as an alternative to Lego sets? Well, that's quite a question. So for one, the Lego sets, because of we've increased the number of attendees, or the number of attendees has increased. It's unfortunately not quite possible anymore, especially in the way that things changed after the pandemic and the way that things. A lot of those sets used to come from the way they used to run the Lego community team before I owned the company. So a lot of changes have been made in how we get those sets that we were able to give to every attendee. So we can't guarantee every attendee a Lego set anymore. That's why we've changed from the goodie bag to the swag bag, because honestly, we just don't know what's going to end up in it quite yet. We'll land somewhere solid eventually, I promise. And we don't have good luck at getting access to the Lego soccer balls. It's the one part that we're always hoping is going to show up on our list of available items when we place our recognized networking event order through Lego, but we have not had that luck yet. So good question, bad answer. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah.
All right. Well, our next module is Brick Fair 2021.
That's fun.
It's just a sweeping motion.
That's very
the
smooth.
Scooper. I like to call it the scooper, I think.
Scooper?
Yeah, the scooper.
It has a rotating
Agitator.
lift arm as the agitator.
Nice. Ooh, I like that one.
That one seems very smooth.
Very smooth.
Yes.
Yeah, if you get it going the wrong speed, a ball will actually get stuck here and then shot out.
Yeah.
And probably a lot like the foosball table there, you probably, if you were at the ramp was a little higher angle, or the legs were spinning a little faster, I could see it getting stuck and then shooting out aggressively out of that thing.
I made one modification to it. I moved this part out because a ball would get stuck right there, and then this arm would not be able to spin anymore.
Yeah. It wouldn't be able to agitate. You'd agitate your agitator.
Yeah, it would actually jam up because of the agitator. The next
Bonham
one,
says that he thinks you can buy the balls from Lego Pick-a-Brick now, not sure the cost. Well, that's good. If they're in Pick-a-Brick, we might actually get them on the list this year.
oh, that'd be wonderful.
Ooh.
That'd be
Well,
fantastic.
they were on the pick a brick list last year.
Oh, they were? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, never mind.
All right, so the
Chainsaw.
chainsaw.
Yeah.
I got the inspiration for this one off of a friend's
Oh.
party bus set.
Oh.
These two splat gears were in there, and I just ordered up a whole bunch of them and came up with this is the result.
That's fun.
Yeah, I like
that.
the look of this one. I know that I've tried to use those splat gears, and they're kind of loose, so they don't. I can kind of see it here. The motion looks a little jerky. Have you tended to notice that on this one too?
Yes. Yes. Every so often you just got to push all the parts back together. What I have in between is a 2x2 round brick with the axle hole, and that's what's actually connecting it to the gears in the back.
Yeah.
So these actually just spin on the axles. These splat gears, because there's just a single hole. There's not an axle hole.
Okay. Yeah, so you really have to have that 2x2 brick in there, the 2x2 round brick in there, because it has an axle hole in
If
order
you
to get
notice
it to spin
The
nicely.
purple one is spinning the opposite direction as the
Yep.
as the salmon. Or,
And you
You
can
know,
see,
I-
you see lots of Lego dust there.
yes.
Yeah.
I've built long trains of gears like this, and the power source is at the bottom, right? That's where the motor is, and the bottom one. And by the time you get all the way to, that's like 8 gears difference before you get from there up to the end. And I wonder if it wouldn't be, I don't know, more efficient or less risky to put the source of the power in the middle of that gear line, so it has less distance in each direction.
I wouldn't want to. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a
I
thought.
I feel like I would want to control them from the back with actual Technic gears and not rely on the splat gears to do the actual turning, because they just don't look, as Ben said, as reliable as actual Technic gears.
Yeah.
But even in that sense, driving the Technic gears, if you you can make each gear line shorter. Instead of one that's like 7 units long, make 2 of them that are each 3 units long and put the source in the middle. That's just that's all I'm saying.
Oh, I was saying yes, and I wasn't negating what you were saying.
Okay.
See, get Kevin Builds threw a comment in that's useful too there.
It says if you double them up, one on top of the other, and offset them, they work pretty well in high load situations. Thank you. It's Kevin Builds.
Ah, yes.
So-
yeah.
This gear is driven from the axle going through, but this next gear is actually driven through these gears
Yikes. Okay.
to that. And then this gear drives this gear through the purple. This gear drives this gear through that purple on the backside.
That's I'm interested in Kevin Build's comments that they work well in high load situations. And my thought is, if you have a high load situation in a GBC, then you should redesign it. That's my general thought.
Yeah. I could easily do that all the way up and get rid of the purple gears.
Yeah.
That's the way to be constructive when you're giving criticism. Nice example, Ray. Thank you.
I'm not sure I would do. Maybe make it more reliable is one thing, but I love the look of this one.
Me too.
Oh, I do too. Yes.
Yeah,
100%.
It definitely would draw my eye. I've never seen a coral pink chainsaw for sure.
Oh, that coral? Yeah, that's UV active.
All right.
Oh,
to the whole
nice.
to the whole panel, to everybody here. Does that does that create more problems from you when you start looking more at the form than the function and trying to use new pieces like this? Is it harder to design them with newer colors, with like more, like I've seen ones that like a ball pump that's a castle, or like it's a waterfall, or like something where it's like, look, it goes through the police department and it makes the helicopter rotor spin and stuff like that. Is that not worth the complication to you guys who just like to see the machines work, or how do you guys balance that form and function?
So from my standpoint, I stay with function versus form because a lot of the audience wants to see how the function works. They aren't at this display to see the castle. They're there to see the form or the actual function. And if you do go with form and function, it's good to think ahead and design it so that the form is more of a shell that comes off. So if it breaks, it's easier to get in there and fix. If you have to disassemble the form to get to the function, you're not a quick fix if that module jams or something.
And I don't mean to stick to just a discussion about making it look like a castle. I even mean something like this,
No.
it's a beautiful coral chainsaw. Like, does that create more problems when you're trying to get more color into it because of the limited ability of some of these pieces that you use a lot in Lego in different colors?
Sometimes, not always. Like John Brose did a pump jack. It's a ball pump that's got, if you don't know what a pump jack is, those are the oil pumps you see spinning in a field, where they have a big counterweight on them, spin around. So John made a GBC module that's just a ball pump, and the pump jack looks like it's pulling the balls up out, and then they kind of roll down a hill.
Yeah,
so he added form to the basic function of the ball pump, and that pump jack is designed so you pull one axle out, and you can literally split the shell off of it, so you can get inside there, and if the ball pump were to jam.
I keep when I saw this chainsaw with the with those coral splat gears, I thought of an adage my daughter likes to use, which is let's make GBC cute. And I know there's a component of the audience that wants it to have multiple, wants it to do the thing, but also tell a story. And I do think that there's an opportunity there to make it better in that sense. And lately I've seen a lot more of them like that. And here's an example of it. It looks interesting. It doesn't just do stuff. It has, it has a little story on it. And I can't say I disagree with that at all.
Yeah, Mark, I forgot to tell you that was Olivia's wish out of her doing the keynote speech, was to get more form on the GBC. And since I didn't get that done, you're now in charge of making that happen since you're the chief brick officer.
Oh, fair enough. There's a guy in Detroit that does build some modules with his daughter, and they're Duplo modules, and they're actually very cute. One of them is Duplo Jurassic World module. Brick Engineering, not surprisingly, by the way, says function 100%. I use sometimes different colored gears to highlight the function better. And Ben updates us that ball is not currently available on Pick a Brick. It was, as of November 2024, 80 cents a piece. Hopefully it will return. Yes, let's hope so.
Along the comment Brick Engineering made, you'll notice in a lot of the workshop modules, at least, that we try to color the ball path with a different color than we do the rest of the module, so you know where the ball path is through the module.
Yep, like the wave that Paul just showed us, it's purple, and that was the ball path for that module.
Correct.
Last year's, I believe, was red. Am I wrong, Brian?
I don't think so. Yeah, typically red and gray are the colors that you have the most ability to get Technic pieces in. Yes. So that's what we end up with, a lot of red and gray.
Yeah, both shades of gray. Get the light and the darker gray. Red. All right, well, let's see what we have after the chainsaw here.
Okay, we got my ball counter.
Ooh, I've seen this in person.
Yeah, you've had this in your hands.
Yes, I have.
So this is how I came up with 10 sides using bricks and Technic pieces. I designed this on Lego Digital Designer, started in 2017. I got a working module in 2019.
What is that? A 10-sided figure is a decagon, am I wrong?
Yep.
Tell people real quick why you have that out, because I love that you do this. Why you leave one of the counters on the table?
I want people to touch it.
Yeah.
I want them to see it in their hands. And so like this side has 10 teeth. This side only has 1 tooth, and that's why I'm able to convert this goes around 10 times, or it goes around once, and this one goes 1/10, and so on.
Nice. And it's I believe. Oh, and there's a Brickle there. Thank you. There's one of the Brickworld mascots sitting there on the corner. I believe that's Trickle Brickle. But it's nice to see when you are showing that to kids and inspiring them to build and think of Lego creations this way, and think of Lego as a medium in this way. I love that you do that at the shows.
Yes, and everybody 25 and under cannot understand how this works because they think there's some kind of computer sensor in it. No, it's all mechanical.
Yeah,
that's
And
awesome.
It blows their mind. So here, as the balls come in, they drop into a almost like a water pump.
Like a carousel?
And yeah, okay.
Okay.
Well, the ball gets pulled
Or not.
around to the other side, and that's what actually lifts the balls up.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, yes.
It's a ball pump of sorts, but I guess according to Lego 48, it's mine. I don't.
So it's Kevin Builds updates us that it doesn't look like it's in any sets this year, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah.
Ouch.
Okay,
Yeah,
and
that's,
then
that's a very cool
this
mechanism.
This red arm gets lifted up by the ball as the ball goes underneath it. It lifts that red arm. And then it pulls this pin.
Pulls the pin out, and that lets the gear spin. So that's how it works. That's pretty cool.
And that's a clutch gear. So the outside of the gear and the axle hole are not connected to each other physically. It's just friction between the two.
Wow.
So when a ball comes
Doesn't that
through,
burn through that clutch gear, Paul?
No. The only thing I burnt through on this module is right here. It actually put a full bushing
Wow.
Wow. Hold it right in.
into and that's welded in there
pardon
right
me.
now.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So that's only about a third of the way into the Technic brick there. It looks like it's melted or pulled right in.
Yeah,
Halfway.
It's Kevin
Halfway.
Builds. I believe had the same question because he asked how often do you have to replace that clutch gear, but that's the exact gear we're talking about, right?
Yep.
The clutch.
The white
No,
one.
that's
Thank you.
the white one right back here.
Yeah, the white one with the dark gray interior, that's the clutch gear. Those
That's the clutch
those
gear.
are
That's the
important
white
anytime you
one.
have too much friction or you want to do something crazy like this.
Those are good for protecting your motor if you're worried that something might get jammed and the gear train gets locked. You don't want your motor to stall because it'll overheat. So
Very
it's
true.
much better to have a sacrificial gear than a sacrificial motor.
Oh,
So
definitely.
I actually have that in place on the next module for what Jeremy just mentioned.
Doing a little repair there, but we got another ball pump here, and we're
Yep.
shooting some baskets. Shooting some
And in the
hoops.
meantime, we can remind everybody if they like what they're seeing, and why wouldn't you? It's a fun day here. We're learning a lot of stuff. We're mathing a lot. You can hit the like button. Please do. You subscribe to the channel. You'll turn on bell notifications. It'll alert you anytime that we're live. In addition to that, you can, of course, join the channel, which I do believe we have one person who joined the channel to see this, and then I made it public. So apologies and thank you for subscribing. If you would not like to subscribe, please cancel your subscription before next month. But you can also, if you're enjoying what you see, and there are many ways to thank and support the channel. There's a tip jar down underneath the screen. It says say thanks. You can go ahead and click that. You can do a super chat. You can join the channel. You can check us out every Sunday. We go live for Think Outside the Blocks, where Ben and I show off our mocks to each other and give each other some constructive criticism. And then we engage in general silliness, and it gets a little bit more adult as the night goes. But that's the live stream. This is a Brickworld virtual presentation, and you can join for any number of things that happens on our channel. We do have 3 different types of programming we do, 4 altogether, actually. We have videos, and then we go live with Animal Crossing on Wednesdays. We go live with Think Outside the Blocks on Sundays, and we'll be doing, we hope, one Brickworld virtual presentation a month. So let's check out this module here, Paul.
So the inbox on this one, I have a ramp going down to another ramp, and that's one-sided again. And that one doesn't really need an agitator because these pins, I could put 100 balls in here, it'll empty right out. These pins actually act as the.
So you've seen a couple different versions of this lifting technique here. This one's using the telescope piece as
Correct.
opposed to just the Technic pins.
Yeah, I found those on the Pick-a-Brick wall. I just had to.
Oh yeah,
I think I have a whole cup of them.
Yeah,
in sand green. That's nice.
yeah, and the balls seem to cozy in there very nicely.
And on that, I got the motor over here, and I got the white gear, clutch gear on that side. And that, so if this chain is jammed, the motor can keep spinning.
Yeah. All right. That's very cool.
Do you have those telescopes locked in there with the new like juice cup top, the water bottle top piece, the 1x1 round tile with the bar sticking out?
No, these go directly into that.
They've got
Chain.
good clutch power that way, and you don't have
Yeah, they do.
You got nothing
Yeah.
sticking them. I'd imagine those would fall off pretty easily, but that's great that they that works that well.
It's a stud receptacle on the back of the gear there, as well as the pinhole. So you can
And-
push a stud in there just like you can a Technic piece. It is
Yeah.
just held in by the top
I
of
guess
the
they're.
stud, but
I think Rafe said earlier that the ball weighs 8 grams. Am I wrong?
1 gram.
I think it's less than a gram. It's about a
Less than a
gram.
gram. I don't know what I heard then. Maybe he said 0.8 grams and I misunderstood.
So there's not a lot of stress on those telescopes.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So you got
Cool.
the stud on one side and the anti-stud on the other side.
You also say anti-stud. Interesting. Ben says that. I say tube. Anyway, sorry. I tend to get off topic.
Yes. Never once. So there we go. So this is the
So I call the tube that piece right there between my fingers.
tube, yeah, the circle piece
Yeah.
in the middle
Yeah. Okay.
versus the
Me
anti-stud.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are we
Squirrel.
lifting this up
So-
to here?
We'll,
I
we'll
squirreled
come around
everybody,
to the other
sorry.
side. And this one likes to make a lot of noise.
Ski hill.
Ski
On the hill we
yeah.
go. A slalom, right? Is that what they call it when you do it this way?
Yeah, but I ran out of letters to call it a slalom. That's
Yeah.
why I just call it ski hill instead of a slalom hill.
Nice.
Works for me.
And then you got the ball return ramp. And that I made modular so I can make it any length. So, I'm actually
And
using
we
it
are
as a
back at the
fence
beginning.
today.
Nice.
Okay. And you like to go by Darth GBC as your handle.
Yeah.
You have any Star Wars modules in the works, or is that just, a fun name?
Oh, that has to be kept secret at the moment.
All right. I never asked.
He could tell you, but he'd have to kill you.
Yeah. Anybody in the chat or in the panel have any questions for Paul on this GBC here up in beautiful Grand Forks, North Dakota?
Yeah, the sun's shining.
Sun shining.
Yeah, same here.
All right. Well, we can switch back over to our run of show to see who's supposed to be up next.
We
That
got,
would
last but not
be-
least, of course, the previous CBO of Brickworld, Mr. Brian Bonahum, is coming up last year. So let's go ahead and move over to Brian's Loop over at good old Fort Wayne, Indiana.
And we'll make Brian our special guest leader. And here we go, Brian.
There we are. All right.
Get you up.
So I'm going to do a quick walk around of the modules before we turn them on, and because I want to poke my fingers in some places, and then we'll do a view of the machine running, and you can ask questions anytime. So this first module where we're starting is what I call my control module. This one I can very finely tune the speed the balls are coming out and set the entire pace for the entire loop. And you can see it's got an inbox that holds about 300 or 400 balls, and it just slowly feeds them out. And then quickly up, we have a single worm gear drive that then drops into a dumper module that was a 2017 module. And this module, I have a duplicate of it sitting here. It has an inbox agitation. And as the thing goes up, as the dump goes up and down, the inbox gets bumped from underneath. And so it agitates the inbox to keep it moving. And all it's doing is going up and down and tipping the balls out the other side. Then you get into the Caterpillar module, and this, well, it looks like it's not a stepper module. It actually, by definition, is kind of a stepper module. We'll show you underneath. There's just a big, pull off the top real quick, a big camshaft underneath there. And it's these pieces just ride on the camshaft. And so it's got a whole bunch of steps to get from bottom to top. Very small movement. Then you have a flex picker module. And a lot of people stare at this one for a while, wondering how it works. And the way it works is
Rubber bands.
There's a rubber band. And as the module comes up to the top, this wheel hits the gray bar, and that causes it to open just enough to let the ball drop out onto the output ramp. Then we're back into one of the 2024 Hoken modules that Lowry George designed that was in the workshop. And then you're to a stepper module, and this one's been around since 2006. And it's gone through a couple different iterations, had some parts replaced, but generally speaking, it was a modified version of something Steve Hassenplug originally put together in 2005. It should look a lot like the Wave module we did, except this has one more step. That way it gave us a little extra height on the output. And the next module is my version of a ski module. This one has been around since April of 2005. As you see, it's got a brick-built chain. So this chain ain't coming apart. Never has. And it's driven actually by, and there's a wheel at the bottom too, but you'll see one here at the top. They're just a rubber wheel. And I put tension on the chain with the shock absorbers, pushing the top up to keep it engaged. And then the bottom spins. And then there's also an agitator in the inbox that moves up and down to make sure the ball's clear. Then it comes up, throws them off, and it's called shush, even though it's not shushing. And it goes down a ski slope looking ramp down to the bottom and into the 2018 Brickworld module, which we already talked about. And then it goes into an inverted Archimedes screw. So the ball's right up the inside of this tunnel. Again, it's a screw just like the one Jeremy showed. It's based on one that Mako Arts did over in Europe. I just saw his run and thought it was a neat idea. I will note that these yellow gear pieces are under stress. So they're actually being tilted, so they're not in line the way they're supposed to be. This next one was the 2022 Brickworld module. And it's just a little wheel lift that dumps them out and into this module, which is a little rollover top. This is based on Ethan McCain's Banana Gig module. I made it a little longer in box, reversed the side of the motor, gave it a longer output. But it's basically the same functionality as what he did. Then you're into my old just mass conveyor module. This has been around for a long time too. In fact, I'm going to try to zoom in. And if you can see that gray wheel in there, see how it looks like a gear now? That's how long it's been running on those tracks. So it's actually worn the wheel, the plastic away. And then we get to my bridge module, which obviously isn't going over anything today, but this is also a counter. And my counter is electronic. So this is an electro-optical sensor that was made by High Technic, and then it's all run by an NXT. And so it sees the balls coming up the chain and counts them. Then they go up. Sorry to move quick, but up from here, up over the top, and then they roll back down. It'd be interesting for some of you to know, when we first did the GBC, we didn't have bridge modules. We all crawled under the table. And then we got 20 years older, and we don't crawl under the table anymore. And then you get to the Ferris wheel module, which if you zoom out a little here, see the whole Ferris wheel. So it's basically a 3-lift module. It's got a ball pump to feed the Ferris wheel. And then the Ferris wheel takes the balls up and around and over the top. And then the chairs get dumped down here by hitting this gray pin, causes the chair to roll backwards, and that drops the ball down into this bin, which then gets picked up by one of those overhead lifts I cautioned you against using because they jam. But this one is run by an NXT, so I have it sensing if it jams, and it auto reverses to unjam itself. So it doesn't jam. Then we get back to another one of the ball pumps, and you'll see this ball pump, it's internally the same as the other Brickworld ball pumps, except in this case, the ball stack is higher. And that's why I have more lift, so I can do exactly what everyone's been talking about, is have different ramps that go out from the edge of it. And you see that little ramp there that I made just for this layout, but I have this green ramp that's about 2.5 feet long, and it actually extends to almost 5 feet long, so I can cover gaps if I need to with that ramp. From there, it feeds into my bulldozer module. And again, original concept was Bill Bourne's, and I've made significant modifications to it. This is iteration 5 of mine.
Yeah.
So when Bill did his, he had a single small space where balls had to go out, so kids had to push them in there. He had tiled the entire surface, so when a kid's driving along, if he stops, the ball keeps rolling and he loses control of the balls. His was done with power functions, and so you were dependent on not having sunlight interfere with it. And you see on mine, I've got the studs covered with the 1x1 tiles, and that's because the tracks are one stud apart. And if you don't put the tiles on, then the tractor likes to lock in orthogonally, either that way or that way, and it's hard to steer. So this makes it easy to steer, keeps the balls from rolling away. And then the very back of it's fully tiled and built on a very slight incline, so that the balls, if they're pushed up to the back, roll back down into the field, so the kids don't get the balls all stuck up in the corner.
Nice.
And then they have the entire width of the thing to push the balls out. So even the worst drivers can drive it.
You've got a.
And then,
go ahead.
go ahead, Mark. Yeah.
I was gonna say you've got a workaround too, in case you want to take a break.
Exactly. So, and then we have the bypass mode, which Bill's didn't have. So I can turn this inbox so that it either dumps the balls on the table or dumps them around the edge. Now, interestingly enough, we normally operate with it just like this. And what happens is, as balls fall out of the contraption, people just bring them over and throw them on the table for the kids to push off.
And
so we don't end up.
What I love about how you run this is sometimes when there's a kid who's having trouble with the controls, you can turn it so that the GBC doesn't get jammed. And when the field is filled with balls because the kid is having trouble figuring it out, it gives them plenty of time. Once they get it figured out, you can turn it back and the input back to the field, which is fun to watch.
Exactly. And I can even if the field's empty, I can let kids drive around in circles for all day if they want. Yeah. No hesitation. So I'm going quick loop back around here and turning everything on.
Yeah, how much has it changed in the last couple of years with people switching? Because it used to be like pretty much all 9-volt controllers, but now people are starting to use NXT more, and then they're getting into the power functions and Pi bricks, and so there's kind of a little bit of a learning curve coming into the different ways you guys are operating these, right?
Yeah, there is a little bit.
I think it's still mostly the power functions that people use, and even when they're using the newer motors, it's often that they just have a battery pack to power them. But if for the new GBC builders out there, it's whatever you're comfortable with. So if you come from a robot design background and you want to program something, go for it. But it's definitely not necessary. You can make something mechanical that's just a motor moving constantly.
So Paul's going to drop out. Thanks again to Paul and Wes, the cameraman, for being here today. We really appreciate you guys being part of our first Brickworld virtual presentation.
All right. So the thing that's really interesting about this module is the design of the inbox to keep it from jamming, even when you dump 300 balls in here, so that it's slowly picking them out, and then it slowly sloughs off balls going up the ramp. And you see underneath here, I've got some green tiles to keep it nice and smooth. And then as it gets higher and higher, those tiles turn into studs and things kind of bump a little bit, and it moves through. So you get a nice controlled feed of balls coming out of this, and then that dumps into this red module. And the red module here was designed single screw because I wanted to do a single screw version of this. I'd seen people do double screws, and that's all wonderful. I just want to do something different. But the cool part about this module is that the inbox literally just lifts off, and if we shut off for a second, the inbox literally just lifts off, and then this folds up, and that's your whole module to pack up. So it takes very little room, and that's of course always something that you have to consider as you're doing modules.
Yeah. So the engineering minds applied to Lego building for conventions is always great.
Yeah. And is this screw piece, Brian, one of the newer versions? I know I've seen it used as an architectural detail recently on like the Wednesday sets. Has that screw been around for a long time, or is it on the newer side?
I think it came out 2 or 3 years ago.
What's that?
Okay.
This is a new worm gear that Lego came out with a year or two ago.
Yeah.
So from there, again, we went to that dumper module, and it's just on a cam going up and down. Nothing too exciting about that. And then you see how smooth this module runs.
Yeah.
Nice and easy. And then
rotating cams there. Or?
Yep, that's what it's built on.
Here's the line.
What's that?
How do you make it out?
All right. Was there a question there? We couldn't hear you.
It's all good. Ben answered it
We
for
got
me.
it. Yep.
Okay.
He
So-
showed us the cam while you were.
So we're moving in. So Ray, we can show in on the flex picker that's going here. So you see how it just picks up the balls and carefully drops them onto the little ramp, and they just move on. It's very, very straightforward. Just and this module was actually designed by Daniel Schmidt, and I've modified it pretty significantly, just to get the inbox smoother and less ball jams and things like that.
Nice.
Looks like that the first picker gets a lot more work than the second picker. There it goes.
All
And
right.
this one was an existing. The next one up was an existing GBC module. We saw something similar on Paul's. Sort of the Technic scooper there.
The fork scooper.
The fork scooper.
So then we get into the 4-bar mechanism, the Hoken module, and you see down here it's got a counterweight, and it needs this counterweight to actually operate. It just stalls if you don't have it. It's just a few bricks, but it's enough to take that weight off and make it easier on the motor.
Nice.
And if you look at the back side of it, which I have another one sitting here, it's run by a worm gear, and like Paul had his eat up a bushing, that'll eat up this bushing. The worm gears tend to push hard enough on a bushing to destroy them over time. You
Yeah.
can see this is already developing some plastic wear right there already. All right, moving on. Since I apparently have a problem here with the setup. I don't know what happened.
We'll do it live.
All right. So the slalom lift, we run out of balls because we have a ball jam. Chocolate. There are balls all over the floor.
This is the fun part.
Oh, absolutely. There we go.
So quick intermission while we fix some stuff.
Yeah,
Mark,
absolutely.
come back to the demo.
Yeah, sure. I would say one thing is I would just want to remind you guys that we go live every Sunday night at 7 p.m. Central for Think Outside the Blocks. It's to show basic structure as Ben and I show each other our mocks and make examples of how to do constructive criticism and take that feedback and incorporate it into the builds. And then we discuss Lego news in the second hour, and then we move on to we move on to some silliness with
Pure
the
silliness.
the chat group.
Yes.
You
Lego
go ahead and let us-
related silliness, as
Yeah,
it were.
The we'll give you a little example of some of that silliness. Right here, and it always takes me a while to find this one, Ben. So I'm looking for. Here we go. Got it. This is some of the silliness that you might see in the third hour of our live stream if you join us on Sunday evening, 7 p.m. Central.
Larry's castle stood so tall, we all sat in awe. Think outside the blocks gave a round of applause. Proud and inspired, Larry showed the grand hall. Physics took over, we all watched the grand fall. Bricks fail, crashing dreams to the ground. In that moment, silence was the only except for Mark screaming, no, 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 no. Troy was grabbing a beer, hey, what happened, bro?
I pulled a moto.
No, you didn't.
I did. Under the under the castle. So dragons live here, right?
Oh my god, yes.
Level 1 dungeons. We got kitchens. This is a double high. This is the grand hall.
No, 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 no.
Like the grand hall.
I believe everything happens for a reason, and maybe this reason is for you to rebuild it better, bigger and better.
Shut up, Troy. My castle just fell. There's only 6 weeks to go. I'm in a full hell. Bricks fail.
And thank you for the appreciation. It's Kevin Builds. If you're a channel member, which you are now, you'll get a notification every time we go live, which again is going to be on Sundays at 7 p.m. Central. And of course, Wednesdays at 11 p.m. Central. You can join us for something called Brickworld Crossing, which is me playing Animal Crossing, probably slightly inebriated, but sometimes sober. Are you guys ready for us? Or shall
Yeah,
we
I think
do more
we're ready.
perfect.
We've been diligently. Well, I've been diligently standing here watching Brian diligently fix the GBC. So
Perfect.
it's
Good
just
job,
like a
Ray.
show.
Excellent.
All right, so we're back to the Mako clone module, where it's feeding the balls up the inverted Archimedes screw.
Love
It's
it.
very smooth action. Takes
It's
them a
just fun
long
to
time to
say.
get up there, but it puts out up to 4 balls at a time. Takes about 4 seconds to go around. From there into
Sweet.
the wheel lift, which can run. It's doesn't matter which direction you run the wheel; it'll work either way. And you'll notice it's got a little black rubber piece down in here. That's actually an agitator, just in case balls are kind of sitting here at the edge and not going in. So it's got a little agitator in there. And then from there to this module, it does a very good job. Inbox, same width, got enough slope, balls don't get stuck. Just get scooped up and pushed out at the end. And then as they go down the output of that module, you see how I have the pieces here to make sure balls don't fly out the sides. They get funneled back into about a 6 stud area. And then I'll throw a handful of balls into the lift there. Scooping balls off the floor because, that's where they warm it up.
It's just like a show. It's just like a show.
It's so much like a show right
They
now.
go through this. And then they get to the counter, and you can see if Ray can get back here, we're at 38,000 balls. Now
Okay.
that's a leftover count from Brickworld Fort Wayne,
Thought so.
but it just feeds the balls up and it counts the balls as they go through, and it doesn't count ones that don't have balls.
Nice.
And oddly enough, there's a lot of people that show up to the GBC that want to know where the start of the GBC is. So I was very kind and and I added the word start on the tower so they know where it
Nice.
starts, even
Excellent.
though it's a loop.
Yeah, they
Right.
always seem to be put off by the fact that there's no start. And so this just kind of gets them to stop asking that question, I guess.
Yeah, I would say arbitrary but necessary.
Yes.
It's a loop. It starts where you're standing right now.
And then we're down to the left to the Ferris wheel, and I turn that module off to stop feeding balls. So let's step back here for a second. Excuse me. All right. So balls come down, they drop into the input of the Ferris wheel, and you start to see some of the intricacies as we go through this. They come up the ball pump and they get fed out. And if we can get around this side, where am I at? There, you can see the yellow cheese slope.
Yeah.
That's keeping balls from falling off the end of the ramp. And if a ball doesn't get picked up, it gets scooped back up the ramp and it rolls back down into the inbox.
That is cool.
And sometimes balls will come up on the very edge of that 90-degree thing, and this little thing touches them in before they fall off. Just enough to make sure balls aren't hanging on the edge.
That's excellent. I love seeing it this way because, you know, I can appreciate these at the show, but like seeing the intricacies of the design itself, the engineering that goes into it, and the time, like this, the successful timing you have on most of these, and that you have the knowledge like you're asking for a glass of water. You're like the reverse Archimedes screw drops 4 balls every 4 seconds. Like, you know, the timing that goes into this is just astounding to me, and I'm very impressed.
So then as the Ferris wheel comes around the top, it just slides down here, and you see how it hits each ball, just clunk, 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 and stops. And the Ferris wheel itself is driven by a set of tires that are riding on it. So it's just friction between the tires and the Ferris wheel. And the tires are on a pivot. So if I push down on this, it'll stop turning, but I've heard sticking my hand in there. Then you have your reverse lift as balls drop in. They run down under the lift, and then they get fed out to this ball pump.
Yeah.
And out from the ball pump and down the ramp and back to where we started.
What's the replacement rate on those tires, Brian?
I haven't had to replace them at all
Nice.
thus far.
Impressive. And that's been around for at least a year, hadn't it?
Oh, it's 2 or 3.
Is it? Man,
Yep.
time flies. Time flies when you own your own business.
Ah,
Or
Cool.
Brian's old business, as it were.
Right. A hand-me-down business. When you own your own hand-me-down business. Just to remind everybody, in case you're just joining us, there's a lot of great resources in this video. Just not only from the discussion, but since it's 2 hours, we can throw in a quick conclusion here. If you want to get started, you can go to greatballcontraption.com. A lot of great resources here, including but not limited to the standards that they follow for the module sizes and module rules, basically. And then there's a good number of GBC instructions that we got from the Great Ball Contraption workshop at Brickworld. And Brian, if you don't mind, if you could talk a little bit about the GBC workshop at Brickworld.
the GBC workshop at Brickworld. Funny you should ask.
I know.
So every year we do a workshop where we put together 100 kits, and you can sign up for the workshop. There's 80 slots in the workshop. We hold a few kits in reserve just in case we screw up. Sign up. But we walk you through building a module and how the module works, and then you get to put it out with the GBC and run the GBC for the show. And as far as Lego sets go, it's a pretty good bargain. Mark doesn't jack the price up. He sells them for basically what he puts in them and a couple of bucks for the effort putting them together.
Mm-hmm.
So you start to see a line of 60, 70 modules that are all the same at the show. And that's because that was this year's workshop module.
Yeah.
And then people will bring workshop modules back from previous years, and you start to get a whole bunch of spares, and Jeremy will run a lot of things that are duplicate modules. He'll send tables doubled up inside the loop and send modules all the way in and out, help save floor space. But the workshop itself, we have several experts up in the front of the room, and we're helping and trying to answer any questions you might have about GBC as well as the module you're building.
The other thing that you see people doing with their module is they will modify their module to reflect them. They'll add little minifigs or flowers, or they'll make GBC cute. They'll do something to make it interesting. So that's always fun to see people who are interested in more than just the mechanics of it.
How long does that workshop run?
It's typically 2 hours, is long enough to build your set.
Perfect. And
We try to keep the sets under 300 parts, so that we can get them done in a couple hours.
Yeah, it helps us keep it at that like $35 price point, which I believe is where it's at. Don't quote me on that.
and then I typically buy 100 motors and bring them along and sell them for $4 or $5 a piece, depending on what I get them for. They're the Chinese knockoffs, but that's what you can get nowadays.
Yeah, and that might be something that I start purchasing and putting in the sets, because that is one thing that we used to be able to offer, is the motors when we were able to get them from Lego. But since they don't make them anymore, we can't do that. So perhaps it's something that we can put back into the sets if we're using the knockoffs.
Yeah, and that's just a call you'll make when you make that call. That's all good.
Live businessing, everybody. All right, excellent. So that is our first virtual presentation, Great Ball Contraption. Any concluding thoughts, Jeremy, Rafe, Brian? Anything you guys want to tell us about before we conclude for the day?
Well, I'll say something. This is really hard. Okay, this is a really hard thing, and a lot of times when we'll be at shows, we'll get parents that'll come up and say, "My kid's 11, and I want them to be able to do what you do." And I'm like, "Well, okay, here's the recipe. Send him to school, send him to college, send him to graduate school, have him work for 30 years, get a retired job, and then you get right." But a great entry is that GBC workshop at Brickworld, because you get a set, you know how it works, you can talk to the people, you get to see them working, and then you can see how people work behind the scenes, and that's where you learn a lot of the intricacies about what works and what doesn't. So it's really hard. It's okay if it's difficult. Nobody that I've seen, nobody will rip you for having something that doesn't quite work.
No, in fact, we'll help.
Yeah.
That's typically someone shows up with a new module and it's out of the loop in an hour because it's not working. We're sitting at the table with you trying to help figure out what was wrong with it and how to make it better.
I can vouch for you guys on that. You guys are amazing at that, at being welcoming to new people and working with them and kind of teaching them the ropes, and encouraging them to keep trying to do better and to be part of the group. And you guys are very welcoming and very good at that aspect of it.
If any of you have been coming to the Brickworld Expo shows, if you remember, Brad Sweet used to have a ski lift.
Yes.
And we worked with Brad for 4 or 5 years on that ski lift, trying to get it to work smoothly and reliably. And after many suggestions, changes, and things he tried, we must have tried 100 different things to get that thing working right. He finally just bent it over itself and threw it in the trash because it just wasn't going to get there to where he could ever walk away from it. It would just immediately start dropping balls or jam or whatever.
Yeah.
And if you're working on something and the only solution is something really, really complicated, then you're doing it wrong. Right? This is a simple process, lifting a very lightweight ball, a very little distance. So if you're working really hard at it, then maybe try a different path. So that's the advice I have.
Brian, do you remember when that ski lift collapsed on live TV in Fort Wayne?
Vaguely.
Yeah, it would have been 2019. I actually even contributed to making that module better.
Yes, you did.
On the gravity side, anyway, and that ended up being a good suggestion. That as long as it worked, that was there, and I that was my one contribution so far to a GBC module.
I remember that. I remember that too. Yep.
Like, use this piece. All right, Jeremy, our GBC coordinator for Brickworld. Any parting thoughts? Oh, you're muted, sir.
You're muted, Jeremy.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah,
no worries.
So Rafe and Brian made some great points there. We love having new people come and join GBC. Please don't be intimidated. If you can't even get something working, if you haven't even started building something, but you want to just get involved, if you come to a show and just talk to us and say, hey, can I spend some time behind the loop? And we would love that. We love the help just chasing soccer balls that are falling off things, and you can ask any of us questions about how we build things, and we'd love to help you debug whatever issue you might be going through.
Yeah, even just identifying jams is helpful.
Yeah, and then you can ask questions as they come to your head. That you aren't like on the other side of the room, and I wish I would have asked this question. You're right there, so ask away.
Yeah. I'd say like the you learn real quick how to clear a jam, for sure. Yeah. And it's definitely a lot of. I had a lot of fun working behind the GBC and helping with those jams. And sometimes you just identify, hey, that module is not working. Someone go do it.
Yeah, well, exactly. Just someone there to say, hey, a module's jammed over here. If we're not paying attention, that's always very helpful too.
And the other thing at GBC, we encourage people to steal other people's ideas. That's something I sometimes see with other themes. People get very defensive of the technique that they came up with, and they don't want someone else stealing that technique. No, at GBC, if you see something you like, take it and build it better, improve it, and that's how we get to this really complicated point that we are now with these really intricate models. It didn't start out this way. It was an evolution. So building on older ideas and making them better. I just want to say last thing here.
Go for it.
Thank you, Mark. I've had a lot lot of fun doing this. It gave me an excuse to clean up my living room. So,
You're welcome. Thank you for being here. And thank you for all the support you've given. All four of you have given to Brickworld over the years. Let's check out SantaCam, everybody. This is how the magic works behind the scenes.
There we go.
That's how you're getting the view of Rafe and I right now. With the camera sitting on Santa's head.
Jeremy, Brickworld Chicago tends to have one of the bigger GBC loops out there. How do you guys measure it? Number of modules, linear feet, balls? During the show, what's your typical measuring?
Yeah, well, so we measured it by number of modules a lot of times, and I think our record was in excess of 200 modules.
400. We had 410 one year.
410. Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah.
It's well in excess of 200, Brad.
Yeah. So maybe closer to 200 in more recent years because space, as you know, is limited. There are just so many amazing things that people display at Brickworld, and we can't have everything, unfortunately. So 200 modules is typical these days.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and it's one of those things you have to do at Brickworld Chicago is go to the GBC and watch a ball, try to track a ball all the way around.
Yeah, usually there's a basketball instead of a soccer ball, and you can easily identify because it's orange and watch it go the entire way around. And it takes quite a while, but it's mesmerizing and it's satisfying once you've seen the entire loop. So Ben, when you hear these guys talking about bringing a module to a show and it crashing, falling apart, not working, does that sound like a mistake to you?
Well, we like to have something on Think Outside the Blocks that we always say, which is that when we're talking about Lego, when we're talking about building our own creations, when we're talking about GBC, there are no mistakes. There are only happy accidents. So says our hero, Bob Ross.
Thank you again, everybody, for joining us. We appreciate it a ton. Jeremy, Brian, Rafe, if you guys want to stick around, we can hang out in the green room for a bit after the show. As always, we're going to plug the channel real quick. We do Think Outside the Blocks on Sundays at 7 p.m. Central. We'll be doing more of these Brickworld virtual presentations. Just to give you a bit of a warning, our live stream on Sunday nights, Think Outside the Blocks. In the third hour, we get a little bit more adult humor, nothing crazy, but it's just not necessarily geared towards kids. Give you a little example of some of the silliness we've done on the show. Here's another one of the songs that we've done on the show, and you'll learn a little bit more about Ben and Ben's.
Daddy Ben, oh he loves his space. Lego ships in orange all in place. But Mara's size, they're all the same. And why that beard, it's just a shame. Orange ships, computers galore. Mara dreams of something more. In Legoland, where dreams take flight. Orange or not, they'll get it right. Daddy jokes are lame. All of them look the same. And your beard, such a disgrace. Maybe just one short hair on your face.
I spend too much time working on them.
And sometimes you just don't do them because you want,
Yeah.
And your beard.
And my beard.
And your mustache.
I'll get back in the photo so everyone can see.
Ugh.
Alright.
It should be more like one of those French ones that is in the movies, like squirrels.
Like a little villain mustache?
Yes, you need that.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mara. Thanks for the rant.
Or you just need
Good
one
job.
little hair.
It takes too long for you to build them. Focus, get it done, concentrate, Daddy Ben. One more word about your beard. Come on, Daddy, it's so weird.
And they don't have different size ranges, which they should. And they they all have computers in them. Like, it's disgusting.
Orange